Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, so we're starting with Gimel. So we said last time like this, right? That in a tour, if he started to eat before the 10th hour, so the question is now, can he continue right afterwards? Let's see the tour inside. Probably best to do that. So he says, yeah. So it says like this in the tour. What about if he started to eat before the 10th hour? But then the meal, right, continued afterwards also. Adalayla, right? And so it says, right, that it went all the way till the night. Wow. So regarding a case like that, Hasaka Rashbam, says the Rashbam, even though regarding Shabbat or other Yom Tov, so he says, when it comes to Shabbat or Yom Tov, another Yom Tov, the rule is like this, what you can do is, if you're eating, right, as you come into Shabbat or Yom Tov, you just like spread out a tablecloth, right, and you make Kiddush. So what does that mean? After you make Kiddush, you can continue your meal. That's what he's saying, right? That's how it is when it comes to regular Shabbat and Yom Tov. But when it comes to Pesach, he says, no, right? So what does that mean? You gotta like totally stop the meal at that point, right? And do another meal afterwards, right? Because you have to read the Agadah. So it's not the same thing as the other Shabbat and Yom Tov that we have. Okay, so says Rav Alfas pasak de afe Pesach enot tzarich lafsik. But the Rif says not like that, right? It says no. It's the same as any other Shabbat or Yom Tov, right? You don't have to stop. No difference than the other. So we have a machloket here, right? Between who and who. Let's just make sure we got this. Yeah. Right. So we have a Rashbam and we have the Rif. Right? Two different opinions. So it says Uvahama, right. Right, Bikat Amazon. So what you do is the same thing as any other Shabbat or Yom Tov, right? You just like spread out a tablecloth and you make a kiddush. But it says you don't bless on it. And then you're going to bless hamotzi and finish your meal. So that's one opinion, right? As we said, so we have two. So far, we got two opinions going on here. ויש אומרים שגם ברכת המוציא אינו צריך. So some say also, you don't need to do hamotzi either, right? Because you're already in the middle of a meal. So what's the point of doing hamotzi? That's what he's saying, right? אבל רב אלפס כתב שצריך לברך ברכת המוציא. But the Rif says you have to do hamotzi. So we have two different, as we said, right? Really three opinions we got here. וכך כתב בהאג, ולזה הסכים אדוני רבי הרוסה, right? So the Bahag also writes this, right? Like the Rif and also the Rosh. So it seems like the majority is going like the Rif, right? Which is what? What is the Rif saying? That you don't have to do like any different than any other Shabbat and Yom Tov. Okay? That's the last piece of the tour here in the chapter. So let's go to Bet Yosef. By the way, in our times, like this will never probably happen in your life. Because there is like a mitzvah, which is brought down in the laws of Shabbat, which is that a person really shouldn't be eating a meal so close to Shabbat, like that, because then he won't have any appetite for the Shabbat meal. So therefore, people don't do this today. It's very, very uncommon. I'd never seen it in my life. I don't think anybody does this today. Right? But anyway, right? In theory, it's possible to do. All right. So therefore, we have to know what halacha is. Whatever. That's the idea. So it says the Bet Yosef regarding this. Right? So it says the reasoning is from what it says in the Gemara, right? In Psachim. Kuf Amud Aleph. Right? It says over there, Mafsikin la Shabbatot. Right? It says for Shabbat we stop, right? Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef Omer, en Mafsikin. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't have to stop. Right? So what's halacha? There's a rule, by the way, in the Talmud. When there's a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef, halacha is like Rabbi Yosef. So therefore, here also, right? Halacha is like Rabbi Yosef. And therefore, the rule is, right, we don't have to stop, as we said in the tour. ואמר רבי יוחנן, הלכה כרבי יהודה בערב פסח, והלכה כרבי יוסף בערב Shabbat. So look what Rabbi Yochanan says, right? It says it depends. He says depends on which night are we talking about, right? If we're talking about erev Pesach, so then we do like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Like we saw in the right in the name of the Rashbam in the tour. But he says if it's erev, but right when it comes to erev Shabbat, we go like Rabbi Yosef, as we said, right? That's the halakha. Okay. So interesting. That's one way of approaching it. So he explains, right? What does that mean that we stop? That means like we totally, clean off the table and do like a new meal, So he says, therefore, he writes that if you start to eat before the 9th hour, and then, right, he kept on eating until it got dark, right? This was a long meal, right? They must be singing a lot of songs over there, right? It's quite a long meal. So right, we're talking about like 3 hours there. Okay, so right, well, whatever, something like that. So right, yeah, something like that. So as we said, right, that if that's the case, the meal continued until the night. You have to uproot, as somebody said, to clean up the table, right, and do a new meal. Miad, right away, kashich hashich, when it gets dark, right away, right? Clean off the table, clear it off, right, and start a new meal. Okay. ולחזירו לשם פסח, והריף לא הביא הדאמר רבי יוחנן, הלכה כרבי יהודה, בערב פסח. So he says, right, that if that's the case, right, it says like this in the Gemara, what we just said, then the question you have to ask is, why didn't the Rif paskin like this, right, like Rabbi Yochanan? So therefore, right, says the Bet Yosef, that the Rif didn't have this in his Gemara, apparently. Right? This statement of Rabbi Yochanan. And so therefore he neglected it or whatever. Right? He totally neglected. So, right, it's like if it doesn't exist. That's the thing, by the way, you have to know one thing, that when it comes to, learning halacha from the Talmud, a lot of the machloket that we have, in halacha, like one rabbi says like this, one rabbi says like that, a lot of the machloket really depends on this. It's a function of, like how your Gemara, is a text of your Gemara, because there was different Gemaras out there in different countries, and each one had like a different text. So because of that, each rabbi respectively, right, in his own place, wherever he was, paskin differently because of the text of his Gemara. So this is what we see over here, this is exactly what we see. The Rashbam, right, paskins like Rabbi Yochanan, but the Rif, right, he doesn't have Rabbi Yochanan in his Gemara, so therefore he didn't paskin like that. That's the whole thing, right? So yeah, this is a very common thing, by the way, in halacha.
Kavod Harav, is this our Yohanan ben Zakkai or a different?
No. This is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a Tana. And this Rabbi Yochanan was Emora.
He was before. Okay. Thank you.
You know what I mean? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a couple hundred years before this guy.
Okay.
Something like that.
He was right before the destruction of the temple, no?
Which one? The later or the earlier? Yeah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Yeah, he was. The first one. The first one.
Yes. Okay.
First.
Okay. The first temple?
No, we're talking about the second temple here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the first temple, right? The Talmud doesn't go back that far, right? There was no Talmud in those days.
Okay.
There was nothing there.
Now I think I know what the Tana, the timing. Now I get it straight. From
Yeah. I mean, if you can look more carefully. If you look at the timeline, you can see all those things. I don't have exactly all the dates, but I know for sure one thing, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a few generations before this guy.
Okay, thank you.
That I know for sure. Right, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was even before Rabbi Akiva, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's the story there. So the Rif doesn't have it, right? Doesn't have this Rabbi Yochanan. By the way, this Rabbi Yochanan that we're talking about here, he's the one who wrote the Talmud Yerushalmi. Also a big rabbi himself, right? The big shot. So, right, both of these Rabbi Yochanans are very important people. The earlier one and the later one. Okay, so right as we said, thinking back to what we said.
Kavod Harav.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and Rabbi Asher is the one who wrote the the other one, the Talmud Bavli.
The Bavli, right? He's the one who redacted the Bavli. Yes.
Redacted.
He's the one.
Thank you.
He's the one who, he put it together. He glued it together.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So Rabbi Yochanan did the Yerushalmi, and he did the Bavli. Yes. Right. But Rav Asher was also several generations after Rabbi Yochanan, because the Yerushalmi was done before the Bavli. Right. Okay. The Bavli is like the last Talmud that we have. Okay, so that's the story, right? So as we said, right, the Rif, the Rashbam, that's the Machloket, and then right, let's go on. The Rosh says the Midelo Heviyah Mikral De'ihu La Maflig בהפסקה בין פסח ובין שבתות ימים טובים. So says the Rosh, right? Since we see that the Rif didn't bring this statement, that means that he doesn't differentiate between Pesach and Shabbat, right? So for him, it's the same thing. No difference. Okay. So therefore, what? Ubikulhu pasik Shmuel. So therefore, right, in every case, he paskins like Shmuel. What did Shmuel say? The pores mapa kadesh, that he should spread out the tablecloth, as we said, right, and make kiddush. So meaning what, right? No matter whether it's Shabbat or any other holiday, it's all the same, right? V'ta'ana Rosh lechazik svarad zo, right? Oh, so the Rosh says, you know what? Let's support the Rif, right? Let's be on his side. That's that's what he says, right? וכתב בסוף דבריו, שמה שכתב בזה דברים נכוחים הם, so he says whatever he wrote the Rif are correct, ויש לסמוך עליהם, so you can rely on that, he says, דאף בערב פסח סגי בפריסת המפה. So therefore he says, right, let's go like the Rif and say that what? That Pesach and Shabbat is the same. What does that mean, practically speaking? That if you're going into, right, the holiday or Shabbat, and you're in the midst of a meal, so what do? You don't need to finish the meal. Just spread your tablecloth, right, and right, make kiddush. By the way, why do you have to spread a tablecloth? You guys should know this now. Why do you need to put a tablecloth there? I hope somebody knows the answer to that question. Because Shabbat requires that, you should put a tablecloth, right, on the table. You guys know that, right? I'm assuming you know. Right, so
if we know that it's halacha, or are you asking if we
yeah,
know
it's halacha. You have to put, this is the reason why they make you
I know that
put
it is
tablecloth.
halacha, but is there a rationale for it?
It's part of Onyx Shabbat too, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, the
Oh,
rationale is like this, right? That it's kavod of Shabbat, the honor of Shabbat, right?
Mhm.
In other words, you're honoring, in other words, it's not a regular meal, it's not your meal that you're having in your fast food joint. You know what I mean? You're having like a meal with a tablecloth. It's like, it's elegant, right? This is the whole thing. So therefore, right, it says in the Shulchan Aruch that on Shabbat, a person has to have a tablecloth, right, on his table. You shouldn't be eating on the bare table. So that's the story there, right? You guys should know that, right? That's good, important to know. Same thing with Yom Tov, by the way, right? Yom Tov also, there should be a tablecloth, and the custom is, by the way, that it should be white, but that's not really halacha. That's more like a custom, it's better to have a white one. Because it's also, Shabbat, like white goes with Shabbat, right? So therefore, a person should invest in that, right? Go to your local, right, store, your local whatever store, right? The discount store, convenience store, whatever they call that, right? And buy yourself a nice white tablecloth for Shabbat. All right. Okay, good. So just recently, by the way, I bought one. There's a store over here that just opened up. So I went out there and bought a nice big one. And so they should have, everybody should have that. So good to know, right? That's the reason why we're going to spread the tablecloth. So first you spread the tablecloth because Shabbat has come in, or Yom Tov, right? Whatever. And then you make kiddush. And then what do you do after that? You continue your meal. It's because you're in the middle of a meal right now. Right? That's the story. Okay. Good. So let's go on. Just like the parable is like this, like when you go to a fancy restaurant, right? There's always a tablecloth there. You know that, right? You're not going to get a bare table on a fancy place. But when you go to your fast food joint, right? You're going to get a bare tablecloth, right? And that's the difference, right? You're going to get a bare table. Okay, you get the idea. So let's go on. So he says, right, to Beit Yosef, that also these Rishonim paskin like the Rif, the Raza, right, and the Ramban, right? They also paskin like the Rif, right? By the way, who's the Raza? Anybody know who's the Raza? His name is Rabbi Zerachia Halevi. That's the Raza.
Serahe, you said with a Z as
Zerachia, Zerachia, Zerachia.
Zerach. With a
Right.
C as in zebra, yeah?
No, the Zain. Right, zebra. Yes,
Fine.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
You got the zebra. Okay, good. So that's the story. And you know who the Ramban is, right? Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, right? You know who that is, right? Everybody knows who he was. He was a famous rabbi, by the way, who had that debate with the Christians, in Spain. You guys know that story? It's a very interesting story. It's brought down in the writings of the Ramban. You guys don't know about the story? Never heard of it?
No, but the other one
He
is
was a physician also.
The Ramban, what happened was, right, he was the big rabbi in
and
Spain.
accountant.
He was the big rabbi in Spain, at that time. You know what I mean? The Ramban. So what happened was that, there was a king there, at that time in Spain. And, and what happened was that there was these priests over there in Spain, So they came to the king and they said, these Jews, we want to debate with them, because we don't believe in their religion, whatever, we have problems with their religion. So what happened was, right, that they came to them, they came to the king and they told him, we want to debate this guy. We want to have a public debate. Can you imagine? So what happened was, right, that so they sent to the Ramban, do you want to debate these people, these priests? So he refused, right, initially. He said, I don't want to debate them. And he was right, by the way, because, the rule is there's a halakha like this, you should not debate, these idolaters, idol worshippers. I mean, there's no reason to debate them. It's not really something that we should do, try to prove that we're right and they're wrong, these goyim, you know what I mean? We have no purpose for that. Yeah. So that reminds me, by the way, there was a certain rabbi in our generation, that debated this guy. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I hope, whatever. But anyway, right. The point is that he didn't want to do it, because he knows, right, that if you debate them and you defeat them, they're gonna hate you even more. That's what's gonna be. So therefore, he refused. But basically, right, what happened was that they gave him an offer you can't refuse. You know what I mean? They said either you debate or you die, right? One or the other. So, they threatened him, basically, So he had no choice. So what happened was that he debated them. He had no choice. There was a public debate. There was a whole big crowd there and everything. And he defeated them. He destroyed them. But what do you call it? That's all this story itself. Okay, I don't want to get into that right now. But it's an interesting story. He was a big hero, this rabbi. He was a very big figure, in Spain. He was a very big chacham. He was also a doctor, by the way, just like the Rambam. He was also a doctor. Okay, anyway, right? So, Umash katav ve'eno mevarech ala borei b'gefen, and that which we said, right, that you don't bless borei b'gefen. You don't bless borei b'gefen. So, what does that mean? When you make kiddush, right? You make kiddush, but borei b'gefen you don't bless. By the way, why is that? Why wouldn't you bless borei b'gefen? The answer is because you're in the midst of the meal, so you already blessed it, because you were having wine, right? We're assuming, when you're one of these wine connoisseurs, you know what I mean? In the old days, they used to drink wine. Instead of drinking Coca-Cola with the meals, they drank wine. That was their soft drink, if you know what I mean, right? So in those days, that's the way it was. So what happened was that they always had wine in the meal. So there's no reason to bless, when you make kiddush, because you already blessed on the wine during the meal. And since you're continuing your meal afterwards, there's no reason to bless again for the wine. This is the reason why we don't bless. Okay, so right, says Bet Yosef over here. He doesn't bring the reason, but he says, right, where did I explain this? In Reish Ayin Aleph, right over there. If you want to look, right, look over there in that chapter, right, which is 271, right, which is laws of Shabbat, right, and it's over there. You can find it, right, if you want to see all the details. Okay, very good. So that's the story right there with that, and let's go on. Let's see. That's it. Okay, that's the end of the Bet Yosef. Okay, very good. So we're gonna go to Shulchan Aruch, and we're done with the chapter. We can go on from there. Things up because it's bothering me here. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, so it says Shulchan Aruch like this: Im itchil le'echol kodem shat asirit. He started to eat before the 10th hour, right? This was our original discussion there. He started to eat before, and then what happened was, right, and he continued to eat, right, until already got dark. It's already, Yom Tov, right, whatever, it's Pesach. So what's the story there? Right, do you know Kemon b'Shabbatot? So you do the same thing as Shabbat, right? So what does that mean? We pass like the Rif. Right? No difference. No big surprise there, right? Because most of the Rishonim paskin like him, so therefore, right, it's pretty obvious. B'shar Yamim Tovim, also other days of Yom Tov, right? Shenit ba'er siman reish ayin aleph seif vav, right? So it's over there explaining this chapter, right? As we said, if you want to look at all the details of that, how it's done and everything, right? As we said today, nobody does this, so it's only in theory. This whole thing. Nobody's having meals, right, 1 hour before Shabbat, and then going into Shabbat. Nobody does this today. And by the way, it's a good thing that they don't do it. You know why, right? Because there is a mitzvah to avoid eating, refrain from eating before Shabbat in order that you should be hungry. So it's a good thing they don't do it. Okay, very good. So, right, so let me ask you a question now, right? I just told you that it's a mitzvah to refrain from eating, right, before Shabbat. Or Yom Tov, same thing, right? So you should be hungry. So then how are these people doing it, if that's the case, right? These people that we're talking about here. How are they going into a meal which is going into Shabbat straight in, right? How are they doing that?
They drink more wine, no? So they would be hungry?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not going to help because, what we said regarding drinking wine, that it makes you hungry is only if you drank wine. But if you had also a meal, right, it's not going to help you. It's not going to make you hungry. You know what I mean? If you had a meal already, you're not going to be hungry. So the answer is like this, right? That even though there's a mitzvah to refrain from eating, as we said, but it's not a prohibition. So therefore, technically speaking, right, it could happen. There's no prohibition. It's like an optional mitzvah, that a person should refrain from eating, close to Shabbat, close to Yom Tov. So yeah, that's the story. If I'm not mistaken, by the way, it's the same thing, right? The 10th hour. From that time, you're not supposed to eat anymore. But there's no prohibition. That's the thing, It's optional. But it's a mitzvah. And by the way, I can tell you from experience that it's very important because like if I have like a late lunch, let's say it happened to me a couple of times. Once, like a late lunch, like before Shabbat, I'm not hungry on Shabbat. So you really shouldn't do that. But there's no prohibition. Okay. So we're done with this chapter. Let's see what else we can find. Okay. See what's next. Good. We got some good stuff here. Very important stuff. We're on a roll here. We're on a roll. So it says in the Torah like this, right? That ויש שולחנו ערוך מבעוד יום כדי לאכול מיד כשתחשך, right? This is an important thing, by the way. And I think I already mentioned it, this week we talked about this already a little bit, right? But here it's like official halacha, which is what? That try to start, the Haggadah early. Don't wait till the last minute. So therefore he says, right, that your table should already be set before the night. Don't start setting your table, when it's already dark. It's too late. You're late. You're behind the 8 ball now. Don't do that. Right? So the proper thing to do is to set the table early. What does that mean? Well, it's still daytime. So why is that important? Obviously, because if your table is already set, you're ready to go right away. When your husband comes home, right, from shul, from synagogue, right? You don't have to tell your husband, oh, gee, welcome. Yeah. Can you wait like a half hour until we set the table? Excuse me, we're supposed to be starting now. What do you mean wait a half hour? What does that mean? Right? What kind of thing is that? The table should be already set, ready to go. Right? And this is not a small thing. You know why? Because if you start late, as we said, right, as it is, bring the Haggadah, and this whole thing, this whole process of the meal and everything, it's a long thing. It's a long, it's a long, it's a long process. So therefore, if you start late, you're going to finish very late also as well, and that's going to mess you up a little bit. Get very sleepy, get tired, all kinds of things. And you're also, especially if you have children, the children fall asleep, and then you can't get them up anymore or whatever. It's all kinds of issues. And also, as we said, right, you have to eat the afikoman before the midnight. So if you start very late, your chances of doing that are becoming slimmer, right, as you go on. So this is the reason why, right, you should have the table set before the night. Right, and the truth is, right, that it's not only setting the table, like technically speaking. Also, everything should be ready. In other words, all the the ingredients, the foods, all the things that you need for that night, right? All the the foods that we eat there, and the wine, and everything should be ready to go by the time it gets dark. And that's the thing, So what does that mean that it gets dark? That means that sunset, right? Whenever it is, now here in New York, sunset is 7:25. So probably on Pesach it's going to be like, I don't know, 7:35, 7:40, whatever, right? So that means that 20 minutes after sunset, you should already be starting, right, the Haggadah. What time is that? 8 o'clock, right? You should already it's already dark by that time. It's not pitch dark, but it's dark enough, right? So by 8 o'clock you should be starting, and that means you have a great lady at home, who knows how to do things properly. You're starting by that time. But, right, as we said, 8 o'clock is really, really good. The best, the upper, but 8:30 is also not too bad. But 9 o'clock is already a little bit too late. It shouldn't start that late, And if it's even worse than that, then you really got a problem. You're gonna have to do some catch-up work there. Okay, so that's this whole story there. And so
What's the earliest you can start?
So as we said, right, the proper thing to do is to wait till it gets dark, so that's 20 minutes after sunset.
Okay.
That's a very good time. 20 minutes, half hour, right? Something like that. That window is really the good time to start.
Because we're after daylight savings time, so.
Right. So
we'll
yeah,
start
but
it
sunset
quite
is
late
always
before.
sunset, right? Doesn't really matter.
No, I know, I'm just saying like.
The sun doesn't listen to daylight savings.
Stop. I just mean that we're after this year
Yeah.
because of it being late, we're after daylight savings time, so we're actually
Right.
starting quite late.
Yeah, so instead of starting at 7, we're starting at 8. That's what it means, right?
Right.
Hopefully.
It just feels late.
8 o'clock is not too bad, by the way. 8 o'clock is excellent. If you can do 8 o'clock, you are on the ball. Yeah, that's really good, right? Whatever, okay. But I'll tell you one thing, it's not worth fighting over these things, like if your wife is not ready, right? Whatever, right? And don't fight with her, and tell her, why didn't you do this? What happened? Just help her out, and whatever. Just shut your mouth and help. That's what you should do. Don't open your mouth and complain, start complaining, You don't want to start your Yom Tov, your holiday by complaining to your wife. Not a good idea. Not a good way to go into the holiday, right? That's not a good thing. So, a person has to balance these things out. You know what I mean? You have to be a worldly man, right? A savvy guy, right? A person who knows how to balance everything out. Okay. Good. So, right, the same thing applies to everybody, right? When you see, right, that somebody is not doing, living up to your expectations, you know what I mean? Whether it's your spouse or your right or your family member, whatever, right? Don't get on his case, you know what I mean? Give him a break, you know what I mean? Don't he's doing the best he can, like don't get on people's case, you know what I mean? Just tell them in a very nice way, let's try to get moving, you know what I mean? We gotta, whatever. Right? But don't start, making a ruckus about it, making a whole tumult, whatever. Not a good idea. Okay. You get the idea. So, right, the most important thing that there should be peace in the house, peaceful relations. You know what I mean? It can wait, okay, you started at 9, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. You'll survive. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's what we're saying. Okay, let's go on, right? So it says mishum mitzvah lemaher velechol b'shvil hatinokot shelo yishenu, right? So it says it's a mitzvah to start early. So he says, why is that? Because, right, we don't want the kids to fall asleep. Why? Because we want the kids to see all that stuff that's going on. You know what I mean? We're doing it for them, as well. It's a very important thing, to inculcate the Jewish traditions, into the children. So those youngsters, we care about them very much. That's the whole thing, right? Good. So look what he says, right? Exactly what I told you. But he says you shouldn't eat until it gets dark. Don't be that fast, right? So what does that mean? Don't start like at sunset, right? That's too early. You're pushing it too much. Right? So look what he says, right? אף אגב, דבשאר שבתות ויום טוב יכולים להוסיף מאכול על הקודש, פסח שני דזמן אכילת מצה אינו אלא בלילה. דומיה דפסח ויסדר שולחנו. Look what he says, right? So he says that it doesn't resemble Shabbat and other Yom Tovs, right? Because over there, right, the rule is you're allowed to take it on early, So if you take it on early, Shabbat, you're allowed to eat also early, even before the night. You know what I mean? But he says when it comes to Passover, though, don't do that. Why is that? What's the reason why? So he says the reason is because he says you have to make sure that when you eat the matzah, it has to be night. It shouldn't be daytime because that mitzvah is from the Torah. So make sure you do it at night, right? And by the way, that's not really a problem because what do you call it? Even if you start very early, by the time you get to eating the matzah, it's going to be night for sure, right? By the time you read the Haggadah. So I guess in those days, it's, by the way, that shows you that probably their Haggadah was much shorter than ours. Because otherwise, how are they eating the matzah so early? For us, it takes like an hour or two, at least to read the Haggadah. So how can you get to it so fast? So it must be right that their Haggadah was quite short. Interesting. Okay, whatever. So it goes on here. So another thing he says, right, is that you should right, make a nice table. So what does that mean, right? Make sure you got your good stuff there, your good utensils, your nice silverware, right? All the nice, right, and nice everything should be nice on the table. The kelim naim kefi kocho, right? Says you should have nice utensils, nice silverware and plates, cutlery, whatever, all that stuff, right? The best stuff you got. So, right, according to your financial ability, right? So what does that mean, by the way? That's why, the truth is, honesty, I tell you, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's not really a good idea to use, what do you call it, disposable, like cutlery, and dishes on Passover, or even for Shabbat. Is by the way, it's not really good, not a good thing, because that's the best you can do, to use plastic, what I mean, and paper, like come on, you can do better than that. The truth is, that sometimes there are some right families, that have either like a big family, lots of children, or they have a lot of guests coming over, like a big group, 10 people, 15, 20, right? Big, large group. So, they use paper and plastic because, just the wife can't handle, washing all those dishes at night. You know what I mean? It's going to kill her. She's going to have a big backache, going to sleep with a backache. So, sometimes, in a case like that, we can be lenient, whatever. But there are also other solutions, to that problem. If you really want to, I'm not going to get into it now, right? That's not the time now to get into this whole thing. But the point is, right, that the real proper way to do it is not to use disposable stuff. That's not the best stuff you can afford. Take out, break out your best cutlery, right? Your best dishes, your best stuff, right? And use that stuff. You should have good stuff. Okay. A lot of people, by the way, nowadays have separate, right, cutlery and for Passover. Everything is separate, so they don't use the ones for the weekdays. For Passover, right? Then there's something good about that. It's good, right? You don't have to work so hard because you don't have to kosher everything, right? So everything is ready to go without koshering. So if you have a separate set, for Passover, you just put it out and right, you're all set. Okay. So yeah, right. Another thing also, right, which is important to know. This is, by the way, a big thing, in Passover, right? That you should arrange your seating in a way that you can recline, because a lot of the things that we do, right, on the Haggadah involves reclining, right? When you eat the matzah, when you eat, right, when you drink the glasses of wine, you should be reclining on those things.
Didn't you tell me that women don't have to?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, that's sort of called. Let's get into that. If you're really asking, right, why not? Let's talk about it. So the truth is, right, that because it's practical halacha, we really should know that. So the truth is, right, that the original thing is like this. The original halacha in the Talmud, it says like this, that women are exempt from reclining, and the reason it gives is because, right, it's considered to be like disrespect to the husband. Why is it disrespect? Anybody know? In modern culture, this is something which people don't understand what's going on with this, But I have to explain to you, right? Give you a little bit of background here. So the thing is like this, right? The reason why we recline is because we want to show, like, that we're free people, right? We're emancipated. Because people in those days, right, they used to eat in reclining. Nowadays, nobody does that, right? That's a different discussion, by the way. We're gonna have to discuss that as well, but some other time, right? But no, nobody today eats reclining. But in those days, right, the people who were like, aristocratic, kind of people, they eat reclining. So therefore, we want to show ourselves, that we're emancipated and, we're aristocratic. This is the reason why we recline. So therefore, the women should not do that. Why? Because what they're showing, right, by reclining is that they don't accept the authority of their husband. In other words, they're like, I'm free from you, I'm a free woman, right? I'm emancipated from you, my husband. So it's disrespect. Right, this is the whole thing, So this is the reason why the Talmud says women don't need to recline. But here's the thing, right? It also adds there in the Talmud, we're going to see in the Shulchan Aruch also the same thing, right? That it says that a woman who's chashuv, she can recline, right? So what does it mean she's chashuv? So that means like she's prominent lady, right? Prominent. So what would be an example of prominent lady? A woman who's like, let's say, right, a businesswoman, right? She makes a lot of money, right? Entrepreneur. That would be one example, right? Or let's say she's like, a congresswoman, right? She's in Congress. Something like that, right? I'm just giving you a wild example, right? Whatever, right? So she's a prominent person. I mean, so why does she recline? Because, she doesn't need to, she's not dependent on her husband. She's got her own thing going on. You know what I mean? She's a prominent person, and she doesn't need her husband to be supported, financially. She's financially independent from him, So she is independent. She has independence. You know what I mean? So therefore, there's no problem. In a case like that, right? She actually is independent. You know what I mean? So therefore, a woman like that can recline and should recline. That's what it says. But here's the thing, right? That afterwards, after this whole thing in the Talmud got, sealed up, then later on, right, what happened was that the Poskim wrote that nowadays the women should recline, all the women. The Poskim wrote like this, the Achronim. What's the reason why? They said because today, the man doesn't get offended by her wife reclining, right? In other words, it's like, she's like, displaying independence from him, whatever, right? Or whatever. Men don't get offended by this today. The culture has changed, you know what I mean? So therefore, the rule is, nowadays, right, according to most of the poskim, nowadays, right, the women do recline because the men don't mind, I don't think any man is going to get offended, by his wife reclining, oh, gee, she's like, displaying arrogance, in front of me. I don't think any man today is going to have this problem, whatever. So therefore, right, the rule is today, the women should recline, lechatchila. Right, but the thing is like this, that since from the din of the Talmud, they're not really required to recline. So therefore, right, b'diavad, if they did not recline and they did some kind of a mitzvah, we don't tell them, okay, do the mitzvah again. Like the man, he has to do it again. But the woman doesn't need to do it again. Why is that? Because she's not really obligated, from the Talmud to recline. So the sages never obligated her. You know what I mean? So therefore, she's not really required. So therefore, lechatchila, the women today should recline, right? And b'diavad, if they did not, so we don't tell them to do it again. They're done. They're good, right? Yeah. So that's the story there. Okay. Good. So right. So it says as we said, right, that the reason why we recline is because we're displaying, right, independence, and right, emancipation, right, and prominence, whatever, all these kinds of things, right? Okay, so let's see the Bet Yosef. Okay. Okay. Let me just see how big this is if we have time today. I think we can pull off maybe one. Okay, so it says like this, right? As we said, that your table should be set, on time during the daytime already. So it says even if he's in the study hall, right? The guy, right? The husband is learning Torah in a Bet HaMidrash. Yakum mishum shemitzvah le'maher le'achol b'shvil ha'tinokot. So it says, right, that even though you're studying Torah, you should get up, stop learning, close your Gemara and go home and do the Haggadah right away, because as we said, right, we don't want you to be late because of your children, all that stuff, right? As we said, so therefore go home on time, right? And don't keep learning Gemara all night, and then like your wife was waiting for you, you're like telling her, I'll be home around 10 o'clock. We'll start. Like, what 10 o'clock? We're supposed to start at 8 o'clock. What are you talking about? Don't learn at that night, and get involved in learning. That's what we're saying, right? You can learn later, by the way. After you finish, you can learn all you want. You can learn all night, right? As we say in the Haggadah, right? We read that they learned all night, but not before the Haggadah. After the Haggadah, you can learn all night, no problem. Right? That's the story. So, yeah. So he says, right? Where's the source for this? Perek Rabbi Psachim, right? It's over there in the Gemara. Right? As we said, but you shouldn't eat before it gets dark. Right? At least on Passover, right? So regarding that, says the Beit Yosef, King Katav Rosh. The Rosh also says this. But Tema Amai Tana Ad Shetechashach Tefe Mibe'erev Shabbatot V'Yamim Tovim. So he says, right? But he says there's a wonder over here. Why does it say, right? You should wait till it gets dark, as opposed to Erev Shabbat and Erev Yom Tov, other Yom Tov. ויש לומר דעתה להשמינן דאף אגב דבשבתות ימים טובים יכול להוסיף מחול על הקודש ולאכול קודם משתתחשך כי דמינן בפרק תפילת שחר בערב פסח לא מצא אכיל עד שתחשך וכן משמע בירושלמי. So as we said, right, what he's saying here is what we already saw on the tour, which is that there's a difference between Pesach and the other holidays and Shabbat, because on Shabbat and the other holidays you can start early if you want, but not right Pesach, as we said. It's different. Okay. We learn in the Gemara Zevachim, Pesach eno yernechal ela belayla. So it says, right, that the Korban Pesach, right, the sacrifice of Passover, is only eaten at night. Umatzah itkash lePesach, and matzah is the same as the Pesach, has the same halacha, right? The Ketib, because it says in the verse in Shemot, right, Exodus. Al matzot u'marorim yochlu, right? You should eat together the Pesach with the matzot and the maror. It's all eaten together. So therefore, they have the same halacha. V'chein katav gam ken perek tfilat hashachar. That's what it says also in Brachot. Katuv be'tumat hadeshen. It says in Tumat hadeshen, the af al gav dekodem shisiyam haggadah yagia lechol matzav maror hayeh laila mamash. So it says even though that. So look what he says, right? Interesting. That even though when you finish the Haggadah, it's going to be already night. מכל מקום כוס של קידוש שהוא אחד מארבע כוסות וגם אכילת שאר הירקות בהיתר שינוי ביבדינן כדי שישאלו תינוקות וכל שכן ההגדה עצמה בא נמי דלהווה בשעת הראוי לכל בצע מורו. Oh, look what he says. So he answers my question right here. This rabbi here, right? Tumat hadeshen. This was my question, if you recall, right? My question was like this. But by the time you eat the matzah, it's going to be night anyway, right? So what do you really care, if you start a little bit early? What does it hurt you? So says the Tumat hadeshen, it does hurt you. Why? Because there's also other mitzvot involved, right? When you're drinking the 4 cups of wine, right? And the kiddush is the first cup, and you shouldn't do that in the daytime, because it's also part of the mitzvot of Passover. And also it says another thing, which is also reading the Haggadah itself, right? Is also a mitzvah, right? It's a positive mitzvah from the Torah. V'gata lebincha, it says, right, in the Torah. You should tell your son, right? Tell your son over the whole story about the Exodus. So therefore, it's a mitzvah from the Torah to read the Haggadah, and therefore you have to do that also at night. So therefore, right, this is the reason why you shouldn't start too early. So as we said, right, wait after sunset, 20 minutes, half hour, you're good. Nobody can tell you nothing. And by the way, don't be stringent and do like Rabbeinu Tam, 72 minutes. This is not the time for that, right? Because otherwise you're going to get behind the 8 ball, as we said, right? Rabbeinu Tam this is not Rabbeinu Tam. Do like the lenient opinion, right? The Geonim, right? 20 minutes after sunset, you're good. You're good to go. Good. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch and we're done, right? I don't want to keep you too long. Too long. Okay, let's see. Reish Ayin Bet. The Shulchan Aruch here. Right, as we said, Shulchan Aruch mib'od yom. Your table should be set already in the daytime, right? Before sunset. That's what we're saying, right? Or before it gets dark. This is the proper way to go, right? Why is that? In order that you should be able to eat right away when it gets dark, right? You shouldn't have to wait. No pausing, right? No gaps. ואם הוא, ואף אם הוא בבית המדרש, יקום מפני שמצום להם לאכול בשביל תינוקות שלא ישנו, right? So he says, like we saw in the Beit Yosef, that even if you're learning Torah, right, in the Beit HaMidrash, right, in the yeshiva, whatever, right, get up off your chair, right, and go home, because you gotta start the Haggadah. It's not the time not to be learning Gemara, you know what I mean, in the middle of it, in Passover, when it starts. אבל לא יאמר קידוש עד שתחשך. But it says, right, don't say kiddush until it gets dark, as we said, right? So therefore, you got to wait your 20 minutes, half hour. You're all good, set, good to go, right? Okay, beautiful. So that's what we're learning tonight. We'll stop here. B'ezrat Hashem. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Have a great holiday. But Hashem should bless your holiday. Should be blessed. B'ezrat Hashem. Very joyous and very spiritual, right? So B'ezrat Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Laila Tov. Chazak u'baruch.
Tomorrow Shabbat.
God bless.
Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Somebody has to remind me always about that. So anyway, right, we'll see you Sunday, B'ezrat Hashem. Why time flies, I thought it was at the beginning of the week, my head is like somewhere else.
Shabbat shalom.
All the best. Shabbat shalom. God bless.
Shalom.